For this, my 11th talk to the DDP, I will probe the links that exist between the Kennedy assassination, 9/11, and the COVID lockdowns. On November 22nd, 1963, I was a third-year medical student having lunch in Harvard Medical School's Vanderbilt Hall when a student ran in and yelled, "President Kennedy's been shot." Jackie is here. I've got it here. Jackie is here reaching for a piece of JFK's skull, which was shot out by an assassin positioned in front of him. With Secret Service agent Clint Hill from the car behind it, climbing onto the limo as it slowed down when shots rang out. This book by John Klein focuses on the work of these first-generation critics of the Warren Report. The Warren Report was published in September 1964, followed 2 months later with 26 volumes of exhibits and the testimony and deposition of 550 witnesses. Starting with Josiah Thompson's book, 6 Seconds in Dallas, I have been studying the Kennedy assassination now for nearly 60 years. These first-generation critics examined the Warren Commission's contention that Oswald, acting alone, killed Kennedy, stationed on the 6th floor of a building behind the limo as it passed by. Oswald had time to only fire 3 shots. 1 shot hit the curb and grazed a bystander. 1 went through Kennedy's head. So the 3rd shot had to account for all the other bullet wounds that Kennedy and Governor Connolly, sitting in front of the limo, sustained. Dr. Malcolm Perry performed a tracheotomy on the bullet wound in JFK's neck. And at the first press conference held after he was shot, Dr. Perry said 3 times when asked that the bullet in Kennedy's neck was a wound of entrance, i.e. it was fired by an assassin positioned in front of him. Admiral George Berkeley was President Kennedy's personal physician. He filled out Kennedy's death certificate, writing that there was a bullet wound in his back, 5.5 inches below his neck. The fact invalidates the Warren Commission's single bullet theory. It dealt with this by keeping the death certificate out of its 880-page Warren Report and out of its 26 volumes of 3,500 other exhibits. This shows the angled path that the so-called magic bullet had to take. Commission Exhibit 399 here shows the bullet found on Connolly's hospital stretcher, said to have caused all these wounds. Military pathologist Dr. Boswell filled out the JFK autopsy descriptive sheet. He puts the location of the bullet hole in Kennedy's back in the same spot that Admiral Berkeley does, and he signs it, verified, G.G. Berkeley. The Warren Commission shows this sheet in its 26 volumes of exhibits and supplemental material, but only after it got Dr. Boswell to say that he had mistakenly placed the bullet wound too low, that it was actually higher up in his neck, in the back of his neck, and the commission erased Admiral Berkeley's signature on it so it wouldn't have to question him about this. Oliver Stone's explosive 1991 film, JFK, compelled Congress to establish an assassination records review board and release withheld medical records. Douglas Horn, the board's chief analyst, wrote that he had, the chief analyst wrote this key 5-volume work on it. He proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the JFK autopsy was fraudulent. 3 military pathologists performed JFK's autopsy at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. My dad, a Navy surgeon, was chief of thoracic surgery there in the 1950s. The personnel listed here document that there were 3 JFK casket entries into the Bethesda Naval Hospital's autopsy lab the night of his assassination. First, a black hearse containing Kennedy's corpse came into the lab at 6:35 p.m. Then at 7:17 p.m., the bronze casket that held JFK's body when it left Parkland Hospital in Dallas arrives at the autopsy lab empty. Finally, at 8 p.m., the bronze casket with JFK's body back inside it was ceremonially brought to the autopsy lab, accompanied by an honor guard with Jackie and Robert Kennedy walking alongside it. I had a personal connection with the 2 physicians who figure importantly in the case, Admiral George Berkeley and Dr. Malcolm Perry. In the 1950s, my family shared a duplex with Dr. Berkeley and his family on the grounds of the Newport Naval Hospital, where then Captain Berkeley was chief of medicine, and my father, Captain Donald Miller, was chief of surgery. I have studied carefully what Admiral Berkeley has had to say about JFK's assassination. He told researcher Henry Hurt, for example, that JFK was the target of a conspiracy, but would not elaborate. And he told researcher Michael Kurtz that JFK had a large wound in the back of his head that looked like an exit wound made by an assassin positioned in front of him. Pathologists covered up this before conducting the official autopsy. Berkeley's daughter, Nancy, was executor of his estate. She would not release her father's attorney-client file on JFK's death. His son, George W., my teenage buddy, shown here fishing, told me years later, quote, "Dad never voiced much of an opinion about a conspiracy, but frequently questioned why the Warren Commission never asked him to testify. But his dad did know why the Warren Commission never asked him to testify, why it hid the JFK death certificate and erased his verified signature on the autopsy descriptive sheet. This admiral knew too much, but decided not to tell his family about it." My connection with Malcolm Perry was a professional one. He left Parkland Hospital in 1974 and came to Seattle to the University of Washington Medical Center and UW School of Medicine. We would operate together on thoracoabdominal aneurysm cases. The UW Medical Center recruited Dr. Tom Shires to be its new chief of surgery. Dr. Perry came with him along with Dr. Jim Carrico and 2 other Parkland surgeons. Dr. Shires and Perry operated together on Oswald after he was shot by Jack Ruby. The bullet tore Oswald's vena cava, and he died in the operating room from massive blood loss before they could repair it and save him. Dr. Carrico was the first surgeon to treat JFK in the Parkland Hospital emergency room and inserted the tube in his trachea. I was the last surgeon that Dr. Shires hired on the UW surgical faculty in 1975 before he left to become chief of surgery at Cornell University. Oliver Stone made a second film on the Kennedy assassination in 2021. It comprises 2 miniseries titled JFK Revisited Through the Looking Glass and JFK Destiny Betrayed. Oliver Stone interviews me in his studio in Los Angeles on my connection with Malcolm Perry in the first one and on my connection with Admiral Berkeley and his family in the second one. This is what I said to Oliver Stone on Malcolm Perry, along with Jim Gockenhauer. I met him at one of the talks I gave on the Kennedy assassination in Dallas and told Oliver about him.
1975, Dr. Shires hired me on the faculty at the University of Washington in the cardiac surgery division. So I got to know Malcolm when I joined the faculty. We developed a professional relationship and we would operate together on complex cases. And I was particularly interested in Dr. Perry's position with the JFK assassination because he did the tracheotomy on him after he was shot. The problem is that Malcolm categorically refused to ever discuss the assassination. And he wouldn't answer my questions about that neck wound. And then one night, after we had operated together for many hours on a complex case, we were sitting in the surgeon's lounge alone, drinking coffee. And I once again asked him about that neck wound. And this time, he said, it was an entrance wound, unquestionably an entrance wound. One of the main reasons Dr. Perry's changed his testimony and publicly agreed it was an exit wound is a Secret Service agent put the pressure on him, and that person was Elmer Moore. In 1970, Elmer Moore was the head of the Secret Service office in Seattle, and a graduate student named Jim Gockenauer became friends with him. And he admitted to Gockenauer that he regretted putting pressure on Dr. Perry.
So I asked him directly. I said, Mr. Moore, did you pressure Dr. Perry? He stopped for a minute. He says, well, I was ordered to do that. He expanded on it, and he said that Inspector Kelly had ordered him to talk with Perry and convince him that it could be either an exit or an entry wound, not an entry wound. And I thought it was pretty interesting that he would admit to something that's pretty close to a felony.
Elmer Moore was also in charge of getting the doctors at Parkland to change their testimony and agree that there was no big hole in the back of Kennedy's head.
The Warren Commission, President Johnson, the CIA, and the FBI were all intent on showing that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin and that he acted alone. When he testified before the Warren Commission and then before the House Select Committee on Assassinations, Dr. Perry agreed that the bullet wound in Kennedy's neck could have been an exit wound, with Oswald shooting from behind him. I did not go public with Dr. Perry told me privately about this until after he died. These are the 7 suspects who might have killed President Kennedy. None of these suspects could have coerced active duty U.S. military pathologists working in a leading military hospital to perform a sham autopsy on JFK's body. 2 key books that deal with this are JFK and the Unspeakable, Why He Died and Why It Matters, by James Douglas, and JFK's War with the National Security Establishment, Why Kennedy Was Assassinated, by Douglas Horne. JFK's contentious dealings with the national security state CIA and military began with the CIA's 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion by anti-Castro Cubans. The new president reluctantly approved it, clearly stating, however, that should the invasion begin to fail, he would not permit the U.S. military to bomb and invade Cuba. When it did fail, Dulles and top military brass figured this young, untested president would yield and provide needed U.S. troops and air support. JFK's refusal to provide this support marked him an enemy of the national security state and its arms industry war machine. Similar thing happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis the following year, which, to the military's disgust, Kennedy resolved peacefully. That on June 10, 1963, JFK made a stirring appeal for peace with the Soviet Union in his American University Commencement address, adding it with, "For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal." Next came Kennedy's National Security Action Memorandum 263 to start withdrawing U.S. troops from Vietnam, followed on October 11 by the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty with the Soviet Union. This was too much, and they killed him. This book of essays by Douglas Horne is indispensable. He writes, JFK was successfully challenging the existing paradigm of international relations, the pessimism of the day that viewed confrontation and war with our Cold War adversaries as necessary, and nuclear war as inevitable. Regrettably, the Orthodox establishment found this reformer so frightening and so unacceptable that it removed him from office by the only means available, since his re-election in 1964 seemed assured. Douglas Horne makes this important point. The very fact that so many of JFK's military and foreign policies radically changed after his death is confirmation that one individual leader's importance in shaping the course of history matters quite a bit. The story of John F. Kennedy's heroic but ultimately unsuccessful struggle against those who opted for conflict and war over accommodation, mutual coexistence, and peace is a cautionary tale for the future of our republic. It is incumbent on Americans who care deeply about their country, like people here, to keep this part of our history alive and not forget it. The CIA planned and staged Kennedy's assassination. 6 weeks before he was killed, Arthur Kroc wrote in the New York Times that a high, unnamed American official told him, quote, the CIA's growth was like a malignancy, which he was not sure even the White House could control anymore. Adding, quote, if the United States ever experiences an attempt at a coup to overthrow the government, it will come from the CIA. The agency represents a tremendous power and total unaccountability to anyone. It is said that most people in high levels of government are sociopaths and as cold, unemotional, and predatory as reptiles. They lack a conscience. That description fits these top CIA officials, led by Allen Dulles, who Kennedy fired as director of the CIA in 1961 following the Bay of Pigs debacle. These three men most likely planned and staged Kennedy's assassination. Allen Dulles also became the de facto leader of the 7-member Warren Commission and helped arrange the cover-up. James Angleton, chief of the CIA counterintelligence, most likely planned it. The recently released batch of JFK assassination files revealed that Angleton kept close tabs on Oswald's activities for 4 years before Kennedy was killed, setting him up to be the lone assassin. And Dulles and Angleton worked closely with Deputy Director Helms, who became director of the CIA in 1966. Lyndon Johnson, Herbert Hoover, military leaders, and the Secret Service all knew that President Kennedy was scheduled to be assassinated in Dallas. The Secret Service killed him by changing the parade route at 2 days before the parade, and made an unusual 120-degree turn onto Elm Street, violating the Secret Service rule that the presidential limo should never make turns greater than 90 degrees. And 2 Secret Service agents scheduled to stand on the back of the presidential limo during the parade were ordered to remain at the airport. They're here. Worse, the limo's driver, Agent William Greer, slowed down the presidential limousine to a momentary stop when shots rang out. President Johnson, Hoover, and the FBI, top military leaders, the Dallas police, the Warren Commission, and the establishment media all participated in various ways promoting the cover-up. In March of this year, the government released 76,000 pages of its JFK assassination records, arranged in some 2,000 PDF files. It is not an entirely new collection. Many of the documents have been previously released and remain redacted. None of these records, it would appear, throw any new light on who and how many assassins actually killed President Kennedy. No earth-shattering revelations or damning evidence has emerged. What these records are showing is that no legitimate investigation of the assassination was ever carried out. In the final analysis, published last year, Doctors Mantic and Corsi made optical density measurements of JFK's skull X-rays in the National Archives. They show that the X-rays were altered to disguise the evidence of two headshots coming from the right front by one or two assassins stationed behind that fence on the grassy knoll. Another new book that deals with this subject is Transformations, a memoir by Jubal Jepson. This is a memoir by a fictional character named Jubal Jepson. Like the fictional Lemuel Gulliver in Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels and Robinson Crusoe in Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Jubal is a retired Foreign Service officer and writes what he learns from his travels through the deep state, focusing on the three subjects of this talk. Retired Foreign Service officer James Warren, the book's editor, is also its author. He provides a brief description of the novel's plot on the back cover of the book. It reads, Jubal Jepson finds himself investigating several of the most dramatic events in recent American history. What he learns forces him to reevaluate much of what he'd believed about the United States and important events that occurred in it during his lifetime. Gina Della Rocca, meanwhile, actively seeking suitors worthy of her and worthy of being the father of her children, has her sights set on Jubal. Though hardly aware of it as it happens, he finds himself drawn step by step into an increasingly intimate relationship with her. All strands of this memoir come together in the final shocking pages as the transformations in Jubal's life are completed and his fate is sealed. For more information section cites 124 books on the Kennedy assassination, along with 130 articles and 43 websites and videos. It also cites a similar number of books and articles on 9/11 and lots of websites and videos on COVID. And Jim Warren has actually read all these books. He inspired me to present this talk. In Transformations, a memoir by Jubal Jepson, Jim Warren states, Berkeley's death certificate, JFK death certificate, was not reprinted in the Warren Commission report, and he was not called to testify by the Warren Commission, along with many other facts why the assassination continues to be an open wound that does not heal. No official account of what happened on 9/11 could not possibly be correct. No plane parts were observed by any witnesses on 9/11 at any of the three crash sites in New York, the Pentagon, or the field in Pennsylvania. Also, as we will see, 9/11 was a false flag nuclear event set up to be a second Pearl Harbor. Construction of the two 110-story World Trade Center towers were completed in the early 1970s. Their architect, Minoru Yamasaki, grew up in Seattle and graduated from the University of Washington. Upon completing all of my surgical training and Vietnam War military service, I moved to Seattle in 1974. Each tower had 47 steel columns up to 7 inches thick in its central core, with another 240 steel columns placed around the perimeter. 7 buildings made up the World Trade Center. Building 3 was a 22-story Marriott hotel, 4 a 9-story office building with commodity exchanges and a gold and silver storage vault. Millions of dollars of gold stored in this vault disappeared on 9/11. Buildings 5 and 6 were office buildings, and Building 7, the 47-story tower, occupied by various financial institutions and the Secret Service. On 9/11, American Flight 11, a Boeing 6767 allegedly struck the 96th floor of the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. Then United Flight 175, another Boeing 67, was said to hit the 81st floor of the South Tower at 9:03 a.m. The South Tower exploded at 9:59 a.m., followed by the North Tower at 10:20 a.m. A third plane, American Airlines 77, a Boeing 757, was claimed to have crashed into the Pentagon. And a fourth one, United Flight 93, also a Boeing 757, is said to have crashed in a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Initially, I didn't realize that all 7 World Trade Center buildings were destroyed on 9/11. This aerial photo shows what little debris remains in the footprints of the 2 destroyed 110-story towers and the 47-story Building 7. Building 6 has a huge blast hole involving more than half the building's volume. Building 5 is largely gone. The Marriott Hotel and Building 4, partly hidden here, have been leveled. This aerial view taken directly overhead shows the blast hole that destroyed Building 6. No airplanes have ever brought down a steel-reinforced skyscraper before or after 9/11 anywhere in the world. Near the end of the Second World War, a B-25 Mitchell bomber crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. 3 crewmen and 14 people in the building were killed. This steel-framed 102-story building, at one time the tallest in the world, stayed in operation. Jane Orient's father was one of the military crewmen assigned to be on this flight. It crashed on July 28, 1945, 15 months before she was born, on November 2nd, 1946. Fortunately for her and us, her father missed that flight when he fell asleep undiscovered under a tree. So where did the 2 tall towers go? Workers hauled away 1.6 million tons of debris that remained after their destruction, which account for only 0.04%, 0.04% of the 3.6 billion tons that the towers had weighed, with 99.96% of their weight, mainly from the steel and concrete in them, gone, vanished. As Jim Warren shows in image 13 on page 135 of Transformations, the remaining steel columns in Tower 1 are seen here melting and disintegrating into dust. Transformations, a memoir by Jebel Jepsen, has the best coverage of 9/11 that I've read. This image on the book's back cover shows Tower 2 exploding. Its top block, tilted 23 degrees, soon becomes vaporized. And at 5:20 p.m., Building 7, which only had small scattered fires, suddenly does this. That 47-story building was flattened into a pile of dust and rust only 30 to 40 feet tall, and its destruction produced a volcano-like cloud 4,100 feet tall in less than a minute. In 2019, the German physicist Heinz Palmer presented a theory that he calls the ground zero model for 9/11. He posits that its attackers used a special kind of nuclear reactor to destroy the buildings. His lecture was simultaneously translated into 8 languages. 3,000 people attended the lecture, and 100,000 watched it online. I first learned about this physicist reading Jim's book. Ground zero is in the ground zero model here means the exact spot where a nuclear bomb is located. Dr. Palmer and colleagues, 4 other European physicists, published this book in 2020. Believe it or not, Amazon sells it, both in paperback and in EPUB Kindle Android format with clickable audio and video links. These 2 editions are identical, except for their titles. Their ground zero nuclear model mimics a volcano, but instead of a 2,700 degree Fahrenheit magma chamber melting rock and producing a volcano, a special kind of nuclear reactor powered by uranium zirconium fuel is thought to have destroyed the World Trade Center. Dr. Palmer and his European physicist colleagues postulate that 3 Triga reactors planted in the basements of buildings 1, 2, and 7 were used to destroy the World Trade Center, where Triga stands for Training, Research, Isotopes, and General Atomic. It boils granite and sends superheated gas and gamma radiation up through the open channels of the tower's numerous elevator shafts, like with a volcanic eruption. The tower's destruction produced voluminous clouds containing metallic dust, concrete dust, and water vapor, like a pyroclastic cloud from a volcano. This cloud soon covered all of lower Manhattan. Another adverse outcome of a nuclear 9/11 is reflected in this ad by a top New York City law firm. Quote, exposure to toxic dust and debris on 9/11 has proven to increase the risk of thyroid cancer and more than 60 different types of cancer for first responders, rescue and recovery workers, and residents of downtown Manhattan. If you or a loved one have been diagnosed with 9/11 related thyroid cancer or another type of illness, you may be eligible for tax-free compensation from the September 11 Victim Compensation Fund. Billions of dollars have already been awarded to those whose health has been impacted by 9/11, including over 1,000 World Trade Center survivors and responders diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Thyroid cancer is a telltale signature of exposure to nuclear radiation, like with Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the Chernobyl disaster. After studying Kennedy's death and learning what really happened on 9/11, Jim Warren writes, I now saw the need for a book recounting determined efforts of those intrepid individuals working on shoestring budgets who had uncovered the real events behind the assassination in September 11. Several hundred dedicated researchers and scholars have been active in each truth movement, having put so much effort into learning what had happened and becoming familiar with the names of some of the most important scholars and researchers who brought to light the information I was absorbing. I wanted to tell their stories. Perhaps alerting Americans not to just what had occurred on those terrible days, but to the extraordinary, even heroic efforts to uncover what has really happened. The stories of generations of courageous investigators and scholars who dedicated years of their lives to making the truth known and could be inspirational for Americans today. The book's author, former diplomat Jim Warren, is here. Stand up, Jim. Six weeks after 9/11, the U.S. Patriot Act quickly became law. 12 years later, computer expert Edward Snowden, at age 29, went public and unmasked a global system of national surveillance that 9/11 and the Patriot Act fostered. He writes, your natural desire to connect with the world was all the world needed to connect your living, breathing self to a series of global unique identifiers, such as your email, your phone, and the IP address of your computer. By creating a world spanning system that tracked these identifiers across every available channel of electronic communication, the American intelligence community gave itself the power to record and store for perpetuity the data of your life. Ed Snowden now lives in Russia with his American wife, Lindsay, and their 2 children. An admirer of Ron Paul, this whistleblower of the invasive U.S. surveillance program, was born in North Carolina. His father, a warrant officer in the U.S. Coast Guard. I would like to dedicate this part of my talk on COVID to the memory of Mary Gregg, MD, my young heart surgeon partner who died from ovarian cancer after being injected with the new COVID vaccine. Studies have shown that this mRNA vaccine concentrates in the ovaries, and many women have developed ovarian cancer and died after getting these shots. I've taken this slide and the next 2 from the talk I gave on COVID at the DDP meeting 5 years ago, before people started being given this vaccine. Oh, thank you. For COVID, the Director General of the UN's World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, a non-medical Ethiopian politician, made the COVID pandemic seem considerably worse than it was by declaring on March 3rd, 2020, that in a population now of 330 million, COVID would cause an estimated 94 million American deaths, a mortality rate of 3.4%. The government imposed lockdowns, social distancing, and wearing of masks. Most Americans adhered to these edicts and then submitted to injections with a poorly tested supposed vaccine containing genetically based messenger ribonucleic acid that produces damaging spike proteins in all parts of a person's body, including the brain. We have important data from the Diamond Princess, where its passengers and crew were tested and quarantined for 3 to 4 weeks after their cruise. Their COVID fatality rate was 0.4%, nearly 10 times less than the scary rate cited by the WHO. The average age of death in confirmed COVID cases is 82. Deaths from COVID rarely occur in people under age 60. Most COVID deaths occur in people who have already gotten older than their male or female life expectancy. The chance of a child under age 5 dying from COVID is 1 in 1.7 million. Children are more likely to be struck by lightning than die from COVID. For the vast majority of people, COVID is no more dangerous than the common cold. Seven key books have been published on COVID since my 2020 talk here on this subject. 4 of them, shown here, are The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and The Global War on Democracy and Public Health by Robert Kennedy Jr. I wrote an article about it for LouRockwell.com titled Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Tackles the COVID Coup. Oliver Stone told him about it, and RFK sent me this note. Another is COVID-19 and the Global Predators, We Are the Prey, by Peter Bregan, MD, and his wife, Ginger Bregan. I also wrote an article about this one for Lou Rockwell titled COVID Totalitarianism Exposed. One can obtain these articles by simply Googling their titles. Two more are Life After Lockdown by Jeffrey Tucker and Facing the Beast, Courage, Faith, and Resistance in a New Dark Age by Naomi Wolf. Before he founded the Brownstone Institute, Jeffrey Tucker worked for Ron Paul, Lou Rockwell, and the Mises Institute. He writes, quote, "The COVID response ruined everything the world identified with America: freedom, rights, decentralism, commerce, and individual liberty. It brought ill health, inflation, political division, censorship, overweening state power, shabby political candidates, war, crime, homelessness, financial strain, dependency, learning loss, suicides, excess deaths, shortened lifespans, lack of trust, demographic upheaval, the purge of dissent, the threat of authoritarianism, mass incompetence, the spread of crazy ideologies, lack of civility, fake science, corruption at all levels, middle class disappearance, and ad infinitum. There has been no open discussion about the lockdowns, the masking hoax, the failed shots, and the surveillance. Still less has there been open talk about the people and power behind the entire fiasco that shattered everything we once took for granted about our rights and freedoms. When governments shut our schools, businesses, churches, and gyms under the guise of mastering the microbial kingdom, we knew for sure that hard times were ahead. It all happened in a flash, all with the assurance that science demanded it. In Life After Lockdowns, Tucker identifies 12 COVID-caused grim realities. Some are listed here. The government deployed big media to demonize those who violated lockdowns, refused masks, and resisted the shots. The CDC and NIH imposed totalitarian control in closing hospitals to non-COVID cases, demonized repurposed worthwhile therapeutics, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, while forcing shots. The administrative state carried out a coup d'etat and transferred power to the national security state. The Federal Reserve flooded the economy with fresh money, printing trillions of dollars. Another important book on this subject is Masking the Truth: How COVID Destroyed Civil Liberties and Shut Down the World by Donald Jeffries. He writes, 500 doctors in Germany held a press conference where they charged the corona panic is a scam. It's a high time we understood we're in the midst of a global crime, on page 149. More people were being harmed by the lockdowns and dying from the lockdowns than by the virus, page 150. 750 scientific studies have shown that mortality rates went up significantly in countries after the deployment of the vaccine, page 207. And if you experimentally adopt the position that our government is actively working to harm us, to dismantle modern society, and enslave all people in a digitally controlled totalitarian world, it all fits. Page 230. Over the last 5 years, the website slaynews.com has compiled more than 1,500 articles on COVID, like these. Top UK government official admits Pfizer new COVID vaccines would kill and injure millions. He is former UK Secretary of State Alex Sharma. The Cleveland Clinic reports millions of COVID vax will die within 5 years. The CDC ends recommendations of COVID vaccine for healthy children and pregnant women. You don't hear much about that, but that happened five weeks ago. Renowned oncologist, COVID vaccines cause deadliest cancer crisis in history. He is Dr. Angus Dalgleish, Professor of Oncology at St. George Hospital and Medical School at the University of London. An MIT scientist drops bombshell evidence linking COVID vaccines to global mass death surge. He is Stephen Kirsch, a computer scientist at MIT. I predict that in the not too distant future, governments worldwide, including ours, will begin banning mRNA shots. These two books on COVID were published just 6 weeks ago. I highly recommend them both. The COVID response at 5 years begins with these two paragraphs. Quote, "This is the way the world ends," T.S. Eliot wrote in 1925, not with a bang, but with a whimper. 95 years later, the pre-COVID world ended with a nationwide sigh of submission. Democrats remained silent as government mandates transferred trillions of dollars from the working class to the tech oligarchs. Republicans dithered as states criminalized church attendance. Libertarians stood by as the nation shuttered the doors of small businesses. College students obediently forfeited their freedoms and moved into their parents' basements. Liberals accepted widespread surveillance campaigns, and conservatives greenlit printing 300 years' worth of money in 60 days. With rare exception, March 2020 was a bipartisan, intergenerational capitulation to fear and hysteria. Those who dared to object to the freshly mandated orthodoxy were subject to widespread contempt, derision, and censorship as the U.S. Secretary of State and a subservient media corps muzzled their protests. The most dominant forces in society used the opportunity to take their advantage, pillaging the nation's treasury and overthrowing law and tradition. Without a single bullet, they overtook the republic, overturning the Bill of Rights in a quiet coup d'etat. Now we have COVID contact tracing to reduce transmission of the disease to uninfected people. Smartphones can precisely show the location of people who test positive for COVID and can identify everyone they come in contact with, when and where, through their phone's satellite-based GPS global positioning system. Those who have a positive COVID test, with or without symptoms, are susceptible to being quarantined to reduce the spread of disease. And 98% of Americans now own a cell phone, and 91% a smartphone with GPS and access to the internet. The COVID response at 5 years observes, quote, "In April 2020, the New York Times wrote about an enormous information technology monitoring system that would use American cell phone data to monitor where they go and whom they get near, which would allow contact tracing to be done instantaneously. COVID accelerated the process in which centralized powers weaponized data in the pursuit of social control and profit. The full extent of the surveillance state remains unclear. But the COVID response eradicated privacy that the Fourth Amendment, prohibiting unreasonable government searches and seizures, was designed to protect. Warrantless tracking targeted the enemies of the COVID state, including churchgoers, the unvaccinated, and the working class. More alarmingly, global power structures are eager to repurpose COVID tracing programs to implement a permanent system of mass surveillance, to instill fear, demand conformity, deter dissent. By tracking citizens, they could look into every corner of Americans' lives, arbitrarily enforcing punishment against the disfavored. The author of The Deep State Goes Viral defines deep state as a hybrid of corporate America and the national security state, which constitutes a government within the government that operates according to no constitutional rules or any constraint by the government. It embraces the military-industrial complex in Wall Street, sucking as much money out of the country as they can and exerting control, corporate control, and political control. She makes this important point. The U.S. COVID pandemic response was not a public health response run by the Health and Human Services and the CDC or any other public health body. Instead, it was a biodefense counterterrorism response run by the Pentagon, National Security Council, and Department of Homeland Security. In March 2020, without telling the public, pandemic response is officially moved from public health agencies to military intelligence-led bodies, operating largely in secret. And public health agencies switched from traditional public health plans to nonstop lockdown until vaccine propaganda. President Trump was likely told that the COVID virus was a potential bioweapon that China released from its level 4 virology lab in Wuhan, accidentally or intentionally. Former left liberal Naomi Wolf puts it this way: let the members of the Board of Health who shut their neighbors' businesses for no reason face civil charges. Let their names be published in the newspapers. Let the deans who took millions of dollars from nonprofits to adopt policies to mandate vaccines for healthy young college students, vaccines that disrupted the cycles and damaged the hearts of perfectly healthy young women and men, face trials for racketeering and trafficking, for reckless endangerment and coercion. Let the pharma executives and the heads of the FDA be tried for fraud and battery. Let the trials begin. This is my last slide. For the first 411 years, from 1607 to 2020, American history has gone through 3 phases. Beginning with the establishment of Jamestown by the Virginia Company of London in 1607, and then the Plymouth Colony in New England in 1620, this country became 13 British colonies. With its Declaration of Independence and Revolutionary War, these colonies then became a self-governing American republic. But following the 1896 Spanish-American War, with the U.S. acquiring sovereignty Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, the country began evolving into an empire. And with the pivotal roles America played in World Wars I and II and the Korean War, Western Europe, Japan, and South Korea came under the purview of the U.S. Then there occurred what former diplomat Jim Warren calls the 3 coups. Coup number 1, Kennedy's murder. Coup number 2, 9/11. And coup number 3, the COVID lockdowns. These coups were not created by a lone assassin or a group of Arabs with box cutters or a virus that escaped from a Chinese meat market. They share a hidden linkage, and it is this: the U.S. empire's deep state, military, political, and economic power elite instigated and carried out these 3 coups. Coup number 1, Kennedy's murder, enabled the U.S. empire's deep state power elite to fund and fight the disastrous Vietnam War, which JFK refused to do. Coup number 2, 9/11, helped expand America's empire by making it possible to launch wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And coup number 3, the COVID lockdowns, has given Americans a taste of having to live under quasi-martial law. What is going to happen next is uncertain. Finally, I want to thank DDP's Jane Orient for allowing me to present this material. For as George Orwell put it, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Thank you.